What is the part of your life that seems to continue to get you into trouble? The part that lies, the part that creates chaos, that cheats, that plays games, that plays the victim, wasn't there to sabotage you? What if that part of you actually held the key to your creativity, your adaptability, and even your resilience? What if this part of you was an instrumental element to you creating sustainable change in your life and actually beginning to move more and more towards the man that you want to be? That's what we're going to be diving into today. The archetype of the trickster, the part of you, the part of the psyche, the archetype of existence that loves to create paradox, chaos, confusion. And this is the part that ultimately lives in your shadow. I'm Connor Beaton. This is the Man Talks podcast. Welcome. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell notification so that you get notified when the videos drop. So that's the paradox of the trickster. The paradox of the trickster is that, and when you look at a mythological or psychological context, even in film, the trickster arrives at a moment of stability to destabilize order, to destabilize any type of continuity. And yet he's always there. The archetype of the trickster is always there to not only destabilize and cause chaos, but to birth something new. And for many of you that are watching this, this is probably the part of you that you vehemently hate. You just fundamentally dislike when all of a sudden you get some momentum going in the relationship. You get the momentum going, in your workouts and your morning routines. And all of a sudden, boom, you find yourself falling back in old patterns, old habits, or you're sabotaging in complete new ways. And you're like, what is going on? But the key here is that the trickster, in all these different forms, whether it's story or mythology or in psychology, he shows up at the door of walking through the threshold to the king. He shows up at the tribe when you're going to deeply connect with community. And it is really part of your constructed ego. It's part of life force. It's part of existence that says, let's turn this upside down. Now, obviously, one of the most famous versions of the trickster is the Joker from Batman. And many people have played this. I think Heath Ledger's Joker, in my opinion, is honestly one of the best because there's a kind of almost like neurotic psychosis that comes out in his portrayal of the Joker. There's a glee in creating the kind of chaos and destruction and disorder. And there's almost no method to the madness. There's almost like no real rhyme or reason to why he's doing things other than the core function of destabilizing that which is stable. And Jung wrote, the trickster is a collective shadow. The trickster is a collective shadow, a summation of all the inferior traits of the character in individuals. So all the individual traits that we perceive within our identity. But he also knew that the trickster carries transformation in chaos. Some examples outside of the Joker are obviously Loki in Norse mythology, which has kind of been modernized with the Marvel movies. But Loki is really the god of mischief, and he brings both disaster and new possibility. In the Marvel movies, he mostly kind of portrays this archetype or this symbol of complete chance and this sort of paradox of as soon as things start to go well, he shows up and is, excited at the opportunity of creating disarray. The other version of the trickster is Hermes in Greek mythology. He's the god of thieves and commerce, but also of communication. And then one of my favorites growing up was Bugs Bunny he doesn't seem like it on the surface, but when you watch the character of Bugs Bunny in the cartoon, he's the quintessential trickster. He's mocking. He turns enemies into fools. All of their well-laid plans, he flips on their head. He finds a way to completely disorient the oriented. So that's what the trickster does. The trickster really appears where order has been set in kind of a rigid way, where order and structure has become stale, and the trickster begins to rattle the cages, making you uncomfortable, forcing you to look at some of the stagnancy or mediocrity or the complacency that has shown up within your life. And he also reveals the blind spots. Now, the role of the trickster is essential. And the role of the trickster can kind of be summarized as the following: chaos as medicine. Chaos as medicine. Now, we don't normally think about chaos being medicinal. Most of the time when you have any type of disruption in your life that feels chaotic and that feels unpredictable, or something that you didn't predict, you just didn't see happening or coming, that is deeply disturbing to the psyche, because your brain is a prediction machine. And so it wants to try and simulate and predict every single outcome. And for some of you, this has become a kind of way of being where you are your own worst enemy, because you spend the majority of your time in your head trying to predict and process exactly what's going to happen. But the trickster's role is to disrupt certainty. When cultures become rigid, when people become rigid, the trickster energizes and destabilizes that rigidity. And when you as an individual have become trapped in an identity of the good boy, the nice guy, the hyper-rigid provider, the trickster starts to show up and whisper, "Really? Is that actually who you are? Is this really all that you're destined for?" And so the trickster can play this duality where it can start to question the fundamental structures of who you think you are as an identity, both the good and the bad. It can trick you into thinking that you are worse off than you actually are when things are going really well in your relationship. And it can trick you into thinking that things are going better than they actually are when things are actually going very poorly. Joseph Campbell put it this way: the trickster is the breaker of taboos. The trickster is the breaker of taboos, the creative idiot, the wise fool, the clown, and he reveals the way by wrong footing it. So this is kind of the notion that, especially with something like purpose, so many of the men that I've worked with, they want purpose to be this sort of linear process. They want this step-by-step process to unfold in front of them. But for any man that I've ever talked to who has found a very deep sense of purpose in his life, and for myself included, purpose has never been a linear process. It is almost assuredly this unfolding that happens in this sort of disorienting way sometimes, where when you look back at it, there's literally no way that you could have predicted that this is the way that things would have unfolded. And so you can see the trickster energy showing up and messing with, you think things are going to go this way. Well, let me screw with your well-laid plans. Now, why does this matter? Why does the energy of the trickster matter for you as a man and as an individual? Well, likely it's painting a picture of some of the stuff that's been happening in your life, right? The sabotage, the lethargy, the not wanting to, sort of find the motivation to go and achieve the goals that you want in your life, the way that you disconnect in your relationship or start to screw with your finances, making stupid choices when you're moving in the right direction in your career or relationship. But really, this matters because without disruption, there's no growth. Without disruption, there is no forward progress and momentum. It's like in the stock market, right? Like the sort of meme online is stonks only go up, right? Stonks go up. But you have these moments of growth followed by collapse and growth and collapse and growth and collapse. And the trickster that shows up in the sort of monetary system of existence is that people get so frenzied that they keep buying, like, oh, it's never going to go down. There's never going to be a recession. There's never going to be a correction in the market. And we have that same mentality inside of ourselves as human beings. Things are only going well. They're only going to keep getting better. Or the antithesis of that, right? Things are only going bad. They're so terrible. They'll never go well again forever. And so the trickster comes in to remind you that growth isn't possible without disruption. If you want things to change in your life, if you want new habits, new ways of being in your relationship, you will need to disrupt the status quo, the rigidity of what exists. Without insult to your pride, there's no humility, right? And so you have to be humbled by the unexpectedness of life, by the chaos of existence. And without confrontation with the absurdity of existence, there's no humor to balance out the natural suffering of life. And so in some ways, the trickster puts us into contact with this material of absurdity, like this unpredictable nature of like, why did she say that? And why did I do this? And, how come that conflict unfolded in that way? Or, you get offered a promotion or a job experience that you could have never, ever predicted, or you start a business and it unfolds in a way that you just can't even imagine. I mean, I've had this in my life countless times where I find myself in a place or a position that I could have never predicted. And sometimes it's far worse than I could have expected, and sometimes it's far better than I could have expected. But either one, it's a result of coming into contact with that disruption, that chaos. And examples of this that you can see in many different stories, right? In the sort of Native American stories, the coyote plays this big symbol and is the kind of archetype of the trickster. And he steals fire, sometimes burning himself in the process, but gives humanity the power to cook and create. And so, he's this role of creating disruption, but it brings a kind of vitality into existence. In Christianity, Satan himself functions as a kind of cosmic trickster in certain parts of it, testing, tempting, forcing growth through confrontation with the shadow. And so when you look at the sort of biblical terms, the archetype of the devil or Satan is this kind of tester and tempter that is continually showing up, disrupting the status quo. And again, obviously in The Dark Knight, the Joker is really this embodiment of that pure chaos, but also the mirror that is showing both Gotham as the city and Batman as the individual, the hypocrisy of their moral order. And so the trickster, while he's not necessarily nice, he's kind of amoral. He's not good or bad. He just serves a very specific function, and he is necessary. So there's a trickster in you, and there's freedom by going into your shadow and beginning to confront the trickster that resides in you. And so the question isn't if you have a trickster inside. The question is how you are relating to him, how you're relating to that part of you that wants to sow chaos and disruption and destruction. And for me, this part of myself has been, my friend and I, Michael, have talked about this a lot, where I've said, I have a lot of trickster energy, and I can see this in my son. He's got a lot of trickster energy. He wants to, create chaos, and he's wicked funny. I mean, for a 4.5-year-old, it's insane sometimes how his comedic timing resides, how his ability to take a serious moment or a moment of order, a moment of structure, and just immediately turn it into something chaotic or add in a little bit of disruption into the moment. And for me, the trickster has played a huge role in my life. And here's the key, is that when you deny the trickster, he will sabotage even more. Affairs, addictions, lies, procrastinations, perfectionism. When embraced consciously, he can free, right? So denied creates more sabotage. Embraced creates more freedom. Now, there's not a guarantee, and this is kind of the trick to the trickster, is that there's not really a guarantee. Like you can embrace him and you can start to work with that part of you, but there's not a guarantee that at some point he's not going to kind of light a torch, like in the scene in The Dark Knight with Heath Ledger as the Joker, where all that money, he's got the big pile of cash, and it seems like he's going to have, sort of gotten his way and move forward, but he just lights it all on fire, right? And so there is this sort of awareness and this relationship that you have to build with the trickster to understand that you can build relationship with him, but there's a cautionary tale that at any moment he can flip. Nietzsche once said, one must still have chaos in oneself to give birth to a dancing star, right? You must have a relationship to chaos within yourself. And that chaos is the trickster energy. If you have a willingness to laugh at yourself, to challenge authority, to challenge the structure within yourself, to break the rules sometimes, to disrupt your own patterns that you have habituated yourself into, this is what creates real and substantial change. When you begin to poke and prod at the stagnancy that exists in your life. Think of a man who suddenly realizes his nice guy or his good boy tendencies, right? People pleasing, over responsibility. This has kept him so small in his life. And maybe you've experienced this in your own life. But when you really listen to your inner trickster, he is daring you to rebel. He is inviting you to challenge that status quo of being the people pleaser and to do it in a way that creates change and transformation. He sets boundaries, he experiments, he enjoys being disliked, right? That's the energy of the trickster. And sometimes you need to embody that. You actually need to embody being disliked and being okay at being disliked, and sometimes laughing at being disliked in an unapologetic way, right? The trickster isn't apologizing for the fact that he's not liked by others. That's just not in his nature. Now, this isn't to say that you should go out and be an entire sociopath and that you should run around lighting the world on fire, but it is to say that you can look at your fundamental patterns of existence. You can look at the social and cultural patterns as well and start to notice how the trickster is showing up within our culture, within our society, constantly questioning and challenging the status quo. This is the liberation of the fool. This is the liberation that comes when following a kind of foolish nature. And an example of this is Tony Stark in Iron Man. He's a trickster hero. He's arrogant. He's reckless. He's unapologetic. He's irreverent, but his irreverence cracks open genius, right? He's always willing to kind of test the boundaries, test the limitations. And even though he's extremely arrogant, sometimes, and he's a hero, sometimes he makes decisions that are sort of antithetical to what you would expect a hero to do. And then you have the classic Jim Carrey, The Mask, right? Or Ace Ventura, showing the very playful side of the trickster energy, willing to kind of be silly and spontaneous, mocking convention, while teaching us how to loosen our grip on control. And for so many men, we walk through life with this heavy, heavy burden of feeling like you need to control everything and control every outcome and predict every outcome. So how do you relate to your inner trickster? How do you build a kind of functional relationship with it? Let's just call it that, even though that would be a little bit of a stretch. How you begin to work with the trickster without letting him burn your life down. Again, this isn't about devolving or dissolving into sociopathic chaos on a regular basis. This isn't about melting every single rule and regulation and having no order and lighting a match to any type of structure in your life. No, it is about noticing where stagnancy has begun to creep into your existence, where mediocrity and complacency have begun to take a stronghold on your psyche and your habits and your routines. So start by noticing the entrance of the trickster. When you feel the urge to lie, cut corners, poke fun at authority, throw aside your daily habits, Pause there. That's the trickster knocking. Ask, what is my inner trickster showing me about what feels stale, what feels rigid, what feels repressed? So anytime you feel this urge, sometimes I'll have this desire in life, and it's always been there in my life, this desire to sort of sell and pack up everything I own and just disappear, and that has always existed within me. And that's always a sign to me that something some part of my life has become stale or stagnant, that this urge to just light a match and fuel it all. My buddy back in Alberta says, he jokes around constantly about going out to buy a pack of smokes, right? It's like, that's the code word for, I'm going to light it all down. I'm going to burn it all down. I'm going to go out for a pack of smokes. He doesn't even smoke, by the way. That's the joke. He's like, I'm going to go out for a pack of smokes and never come back, right? I'm going to burn down the responsibility. I'm going to burn down the whole thing. So instead of, I'm going to burn down the whole thing and destroy it, being able to see what is the trickster trying to teach you in those moments about where rigidity and staleness and repressedness has set in, and beginning to ask, what in my life feels rigid and stale and repressed? Then practice sacred mischief. Practice sacred mischief. This might sound like an odd concept, but I'm telling you, it can be very fun. It's an adult version of play, right? Use trickster energy in small, constructive ways, right? Break a pointless rule. Try out some humor where and when is appropriate, or maybe not even appropriate, where you would normally be rigid. Experiment with creativity in a way that feels like you're pushing an edge or a boundary, where you sing or you play or you dance or you create some art or you create some music that is sort of adjacent to or opposing your traditional path. And then start to look at the shadow. Journal about your inner saboteur. Where does he show up? Jung believed that confronting this figure of the inner saboteur, this inner trickster, was the first step in the process of individuation, in the process of becoming whole. So begin to flesh out, what does this part look like? What does my inner saboteur look like, sound like? How does he feel? When does he show up? What does he actually want? And again, that's the key question. What does my inner saboteur and trickster actually want? Does he want more freedom in a certain area? Does he want to be less suppressed and constrained and rigid all the time and unwilling to smile or be silly or have fun? Or, what is he actually looking for? And then practice laughing at yourself. Trickster teaches humility. He teaches humility. This is honestly one of the best things that I've deployed in my life. I like to say that I've failed my way to success, and that has taken an immense amount of humility. So when you catch yourself posturing, when you catch yourself pretending or puffing up or pretending to be somewhere that you're not or better than you are, laugh. Self-mockery can be a form of liberation. The constraint of seriousness that I see plaguing so many of you, the seriousness of needing to get it right all the time, needing to be perfect all the time, it's almost a form of psychosis for some guys that I have worked with, that they can't laugh at themselves. They can't laugh at the hilarious of their own suffering, their own bullshit. So laugh at yourself sometimes. Journal. Like, what are the behaviors that I loathe that are actually just laughable? If I was somebody else looking in, I'd be able to laugh at them. So why do we need the trickster right now? Well, we live in a time of both very rigid identities and quite brittle moral codes. And the trickster is rising. You can see and you can feel it in the cultural experience and conversation that is happening in politics, in culture, within you, because we need is medicine, right? We need the medicine sometimes of chaos, of disorientation. And the more that you can expand yourself into that, the better. Yes, the trickster lies. He cheats, he mocks, he can be ruthless sometimes. And again, it's not about letting yourself off the hook and embodying some extremely immoral or unjustified behaviors. It is about freeing yourself from the prison that you've built for yourself, the prison of stagnancy, the prison of rigidity. And as Jung said, the trickster is a primitive cosmic being, divine and animal, whose effect is to unmask, disarm, and disorient us. So the real question is, will you keep denying your inner trickster and having it play out all of these brutal ways, sabotaging you, letting him sabotage you in the shadow, right? Unbeknownst to you, why do I keep doing this? How come I keep effing up this meeting? Or how come I keep hitting snooze? How come I can't get my habits together? Or will you choose to bring this energy into the light? Will you choose to consciously embody and take the medicine of the trickster, to laugh with him and to let him teach you to dance a little bit more effectively with chaos? Because the truth is, every man needs a little sacred mischief. So I hope that you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to man it forward. Share your thoughts below and let me know if you'd like me to cover other subjects and archetypes and symbols like this. Till next week, Connor Beaton signing off.